Hello and welcome to the HistoryNetwork.org podcast. This episode is brought to you by harrys.com. Go to harrys.com right now and use history at checkout to get a post-shave balm absolutely free. If you are new to us, then welcome indeed, and if you are one of our many returning listeners, a very warm welcome back. We've another 2 seasons and 20 episodes to get through this year, and we're looking very much forward to having you along. The HistoryNetwork.org podcast, Season 22, Episode 1, The Battles of Imphal and Kohima, 8th of March to 3rd of July, 1944. This episode is written by Thomas J. Hall. Tom Hall is the author of Episode 4 in Season 21, covering the Battle of Franklin in the American Civil War. He has dedicated this episode to all the other History Network authors who have taught him so much and who have made writing these scripts seem so easy. The Second World War came to Burma in December 1941. In quick succession, the American Pacific Fleet was devastated at Pearl Harbor, the American Far Eastern Air Forces destroyed in the Philippines. Hong Kong was threatened, and Siam, Thailand, concluded a peace treaty with Tokyo. Burma was exposed. By May 1942, it would be occupied from China in the north to Rangoon in the south. With amazing speed and minimal forces, Tokyo had cut the Burma Road, supplying the Nationalist Chinese, set forces on the threshold of a restive India, and added the Burmese oil fields to Japan's Greater East Asian co-prosperity sphere. This success reflected both Japanese audacity and British complacency. British strategists had dismissed Japanese skill and their ability to project force far afield, let alone withstand the British Navy. These delusions began to dissolve on December the 10th, 1941, when Japanese aircraft sank HMS Repulse and Prince of Wales. The truth that the Japanese were a formidable opponent became apparent by no later than 15th of February 1942, when Singapore fell. Owing to such miscalculations, however, Burma was defended by few, if any, modern aircraft, while the trained troops sent to protect it had been trained for desert warfare. The defenders of Burma were pushed back, and pushed back further. Sustained air bombardment of Rangoon began in late December 1941. The city was occupied on March the 9th, 1942. By then, the British and Chinese defenders were in full retreat, desperately attempting to escape annihilation. Bill Slim arrived on March the 19th, 1942, having been plucked from Iraq by Archibald Wavell, Commander-in-Chief, India. Slim was given command of the British forces, 2 divisions dubbed Burr Corps. He found his new troops poorly prepared and poorly equipped. He lacked efficient communications, effective intelligence, meaningful air power, and was further handicapped by vague orders to hold ground. Coordinating efforts with Nationalist Chinese troops sent to defend the Burma Road proved problematic. Perhaps the only advantage he held was his divisional commanders, Generals Bruce Scott and David Punch Cowan. The 3 were old and close friends. As such, they were able to speak on open radio channels using private codes based on their shared personal histories, perhaps one of the most secure encryptions possible. In contrast, his opponents were trained, experienced, and supremely confident. Armed with more and superior aircraft, they quickly achieved near total air superiority. More, the Japanese had clear orders: seize Burma and destroy all opposition. The oil fields were lost on April 18th, after a 4-day battle. By the end of April, Burr Corps was retreating towards Imphal. The retreat would cover 900 miles over rugged mountains and vast rivers, crossing nearly impenetrable jungle on dirt tracks, all while dogged by disease, hunger, and an enemy as ruthless as it was capable. Burkor had learnt early that capture typically meant death by torture. The Japanese made a last attempt to cut off Burkor on May the 10th, but were driven back by Slim's beloved Gurkhas. Recognising the tenuous nature of their supply lines, the Japanese broke pursuit. It was little comfort. The monsoon opened May the 12th, dropping as much as 10 inches of rain a day, turning jungle tracks into ribbons of mud and then into streams. Small wonder that Slim's men retained only their small arms. Despite the obstacles, however, most of Burkor reached India by the end of May 1942. Said Slim of these survivors, "They might look like scarecrows, but they looked like soldiers too." The devastation of the invasion and trials of the retreat rival any other catastrophe of the war. The few roads inadequate in normal times were clogged with refugees and soldiers continually harassed by Japanese. As order broke down, civil strife commenced between the rival Burmese, Indian and Chinese communities. By the end of the retreat, Burkor would find itself fighting both the Japanese and organised bandit forces. 2 episodes from Slim's memoir illustrate the desperation and the surreal nature of the retreat. In the north, Slim learnt that Chinese troops proposed to escape by seizing a train. Had they succeeded, Slim might have had to war with his own allies to protect locomotives and rolling stock he would need in the future. He resolved the situation by ordering the locomotives unhitched and moved beyond danger. In the south, a deputation of wealthy Burmans petitioned him to fight his battles outside their comfortable suburbs. Slim agreed, provided the Japanese were of like mind. So complete was the Allied defeat that American General Joe Stilwell, commander of Chinese soldiers in northern Burma, was cut off from his troops and forced to lead his staff to Imphal on foot. Stilwell led the march personally, driving his band of refugees forward at the Stilwell pace, 105 strides per minute. Imphal offered a degree of safety, but again little comfort. Britain was preoccupied with its war with Germany and unwilling to spare supplies to a small force in a distant theatre regarded as of little strategic importance. Local resources were also strained by riots in Bengal and Bihar, and famine that left some 3 million dead. Burkor was safe, but living, training and sleeping in the open beneath the monsoon rains. So scarce were resources that Slim would eventually be forced to find a substitute for silk parachutes. The result was a chute made of jute rather than silk, and dubbed the parachute. With great need and no cash, Slim went hat in hand to the Indian jute merchants. As he describes it, they gave him unlimited credit. In contrast, the destruction of the Burma oil fields in 1942 spawned 20 years of litigation following the war. During the 1942-43 campaign season, the British attempted to regain the initiative with an offensive in the Arakan Peninsula to secure a jumping-off point for an assault on Rangoon. It failed, as the British lacked the resources and experience to breach fortified positions and, once again, underestimated the Japanese, who crossed impassable terrain to strike the unprotected British flank. The British were thrown into disarray and extracted themselves only with difficulty. The only bright spot was the exploits of General Ord Wingate's long-range penetration force, the Chindits, who were dropped behind Japanese lines and attempted to disrupt their supplies and communications. Whether the Chindit raids were truly effective is still debated. There is no doubt, however, that British propagandists spared them no accolade. Wingate became such a celebrity that Churchill invited him to attend the Allied summit in Quebec. Wingate did not bear celebrity well. The day would come that he would threaten Slim with the Churchill card when given orders he disliked. By the way, we covered the Chindits in Season 1 of the History Network, Episode 6. You can find all our past seasons in the store at the website, so do go there and check that out. The 1943-44 campaign season revealed the competing, if not conflicting, goals of the Allies. The US wished to clear northern Burma and reopen land supply to the Nationalist Chinese. This task was given to Joe Sitwell and his Chinese troops, to be supported by another long-range penetration. This offensive and the exploits of Merrill's marauders, while colourful and compelling, are outside the scope of this essay. The British believed the fastest way to restore supply lines to China was to recapture Rangoon. The Americans suspected the British merely wished to recapture lost colonial holdings with American aid and balked at that proposal. Ultimately, Slim was directed to stage another offensive in the Arakan and to demonstrate east of Imphal to distract and confuse the Japanese. In contrast, the Japanese resolved to destroy the Allied threat by seizing Imphal, Kohima, and the railhead supply depot of Dimapur. If Dimapur fell, Allied supply line would be severed, once again forcing Slim and Sitwell to fall back to safer ground, assuming they escaped the annihilation the Japanese intended. The airfields supporting the China airlift would be lost, and forces of Imperial Japan would be at large in India. His orders in hand, Slim added his personal gloss. He would set the stage for a return to Burma and the liberation of Rangoon. He also believed he could use Japanese aggressiveness to lure them to their own destruction. Events moved quickly. Slim ordered the offensive in the Arakan and directed that 2 divisions from Imphal be pushed towards the River Chindwin, with a 3rd held in reserve. The Arakan offensive, now with seasoned troops and American tanks, made progress before again being flanked by Japanese forces for another impossible march. Division HQ lost, and divisional supplies were surrounded by the Japanese, defended mainly by supply and communications personnel. These rear echelon troops held fast, vindicating Slim's decision that all troops receive weapons training, no matter what their status. The Japanese had no answer to troops who did not panic, were resupplied from the air, and had a significant advantage in tanks and artillery. This battle of the administrative box lasted until the Japanese exhausted their supplies and began to starve. Starvation would become a major player in the battles of 43 and 44. On the Imphal front, the Japanese moved earlier and with more troops than Slim had expected. He had planned an orderly withdrawal from the Chindwin to lure the Japanese into a battle of attrition against the fortifications of Imphal. He soon found both Imphal and Kohima threatened by rapid Japanese advances. Japanese forces crossed the Chindwin on March 8, 1943, and quickly cut 17th Indian Infantry Division off from Imphal. Lieutenant General Schoon's commander at Imphal was forced to commit most of his reserves to the relief of the 17th. North of Imphal, the 50th Infantry Parachute Brigade was driven back, exposing Imphal to flanking attack. By early April, both Imphal and Kohima were besieged. India and China both appeared to be in peril. The battle for Kohima was particularly vicious. The British troops found themselves pinned to a small perimeter under constant rifle and mortar fire, with little shelter and less water. As the perimeter constricted, the combatants entrenched at opposite ends of the district commissioner's former tennis court, lobbing hand grenades rather than backhand volleys. Wounded stayed on the battle line in a display of resolve and practicality. Aid stations offered no shelter from Japanese firing. On the battle line they could at least shoot back. On the night of April 17th and 18th, the Japanese succeeded in cutting the British garrison in two. Such reports were not well received in London. On June the 1st, Field Marshal Alan Brooke, Chief of the Imperial General Staff, would write in his diary, A long meeting with Ponal to discuss the heartbreaking situation in Burma. I see disaster staring us in the face, with Mountbatten incapable of realising it, Ponal clever enough but too lazy to appreciate the danger, and Gifford, I am afraid, lacking the adequate vision to see where he is going. Oh, how I wish we had more men with more vision. It is perhaps the most despairing note in a war diary that presents dogged optimism even in the darkest days after the fall of France. Churchill is reported to have growled, "Can anything good come from a man with a name like Slim?" Now this is a great opportunity to tell you about the sponsors of this episode, Harry's. Harry's are a regular friend of ours on our History Network episodes, and they have another amazing offer for you, our listeners. Now, ever since Harry's sponsored one of our episodes for the first time, probably a couple of years ago now, I switched to Harry's for my shaving products. Why? Because they give me exactly the kind of shave I want at a fraction of the price of the competitors. It's difficult to pick one thing in particular that really stands out for me, because everything about the Harry's shaving experience is genuinely that good. But I suppose for me, and I think I've mentioned this before, it's the feeling of the razor in my hand. It feels weighty, it feels quality, not plasticky and light and fragile like the other ones on the market. So I can't do anything other than personally recommend Harry's. You know, for decades, one big razor company has relentlessly increased prices and reaped immense profits at the expense of their customers. So Jeff and Andy at Harry's, two ordinary guys who were fed up with getting ripped off, started the Harry's shaving brand to fix shaving for good. By taking less profit and selling directly to you over the internet, Harry's offers their blades at half the price. Just $2 a blade compared to the $4 or more you'll pay at the drugstore. Harry's razors include everything you need for a close and comfortable shave. A weighted ergonomic handle, 5 precision-engineered blades with a lubricating strip and trimmer blade, a rich lathering shave gel, and a travel blade cover. Now, we've got this exclusive offer for you. Harry's is so confident in the quality of their blades, they want you to try their shave set for free. Yes, you heard that right, just cover shipping when you sign up. Plus, as a special offer, fans of this show, go to harrys.com right now and enter code HISTORY at checkout to get a post-shave balm also free. That's harrys.com, code HISTORY. While Brooke seldom had a kind word to spare for Mountbatten, Churchill might have regretted his jibe. By June the battle was going much as Slim had hoped, despite the trepidations of April. The Japanese had moved faster and with greater force than Slim had expected, but they conformed to his central desire that they should stretch their supply lines and waste their strength on fortified positions. He met their surprise with his superior resources, airlifting troops from the Arakan, where the fighting was largely resolved, directly to Imphal and Kohima. Of equal importance, the besieged garrisons were kept supplied from the air. At the height of the battle, Allied air crews were dropping 400 tons per day. In contrast, the Japanese battle plan anticipated that the British would quickly break and flee, leaving behind their stores to feed the victorious Japanese. When the British held, the Japanese once again began to starve. The night of 17th-18th of April 1944, mentioned above, may have been the high point of the Japanese offensive. The British garrison at Kohima had been cut in two and was in danger of being slowly exterminated. But the Japanese lacked the strength to exploit their opportunity. British reinforcements began to arrive on the 18th of April. Thereafter, the Japanese were on the defensive along the entire Imphal-Kohima front. By mid-May, the British had dislodged the major Japanese formations and shifted from counter-attack to pursuit. The Japanese fought magnificently, but gradually ran out of ammunition and food. British troops reported that jungle trails were littered with abandoned gear, the dead and the dying. They even reported a striking new phenomenon: Japanese soldiers willing to surrender. The Japanese commanders, however, ordered new attacks, with one exception. Lieutenant General Sato, commanding the Kohima front, withdrew on his own initiative. When he returned to army headquarters, he was handed a knife, a suggestion that he commit ritual suicide to atone for the disgrace of retreating. In his memoirs, Slim faults General Sato for not merely demonstrating against Kohima while launching a major strike at Dimapur. Subsequent research, however, has disclosed that Sato opposed the offensive from the outset. He believed his troops would starve before reaching Kohima, let alone Dimapur. The siege of Imphal was officially lifted on June 22nd, when troops driving south from Kohima linked with troops coming north from Imphal. That relief, however, was something of a footnote in the campaign. Japanese unit cohesion had collapsed, and retreat towards the Chindwin was well underway, with the British in close pursuit. The battles of Kohima, Imphal were the largest defeats in Japanese history to that date, with some 55,000 casualties. Almost the entire Japanese command in Burma was sacked. Slim and his divisional commanders were knighted. More importantly, the battles left the Japanese forces in Burma dramatically weakened, setting the stage for Slim's masterpiece, the 44-45 campaign. Now, would you like to write a podcast for us? Many of our most popular episodes have been written by our listeners. So if you have an idea for an episode that you'd like to write, then drop us a line, info@thehistorynetwork.org. Or if you're not into writing one, but you'd like to see us cover a subject that you've not heard before, then you can use the same email address to drop us that suggestion. We would love to hear from you. Don't forget to check out the store at the website, where you can buy all of our past seasons, nicely packaged up as chaptered files for download. They are just £2 each. And on the homepage at the website, there's a nice big shiny donate button if you happen to feel the urge. Also, if you like this podcast, do share it with your friends and get them to listen to it as well. It really helps us if the number of downloads is as big as possible. In a couple of weeks' time, we'll be having a look at Clausewitz and friction. Thanks once again for listening. You've been listening to the HistoryNetwork.org podcast, written by Tom Hall, read by Nick Barker.